Beijing, a city with 3,000 years of Chinese history, no longer sleeps. Under the rule of the Communist Party, its ideology is singular and irritable. The Chinese oppose Taiwan independence, foreign interference in Hong Kong, and U.S. economic sanctions, but they despise Japan even more. From a young age, Chinese people are taught to remember Japan's invasion of China, yet they are told to forget the Cultural Revolution and the Tiananmen Square incident. Japan's occupation of Chinese territory is unforgivable, but Russia's occupation of Chinese territory does not harm their friendship. When Chinese people are harmed in Japan, it escalates to a diplomatic level. When Japanese children are harmed in China, it is dismissed as isolated incidents. As China's explosively growing economy begins to show signs of decline, U.S. President Trump seized the opportunity to increase economic pressure on China, launching repeated tariff offensives. The Chinese Communist government has concluded that it must resolve the Taiwan unification issue as quickly as possible. The People's Liberation Army, JPLA, has determined that to conquer Taiwan, Japan must first be subdued. Securing the first island chain is essential, turning the Ryukyu Islands and Japan's southwestern islands into a barrier to facilitate eliminating Taiwan's rebellious forces. He is the captain of the Kagachiro, a first-class maritime staff officer equivalent to a U.S. Navy captain. He will explain why the Kaga is so important in the Sino-Japanese naval conflict. The Kaga is Japan's first vessel to modify its deck into a rectangular shape, like that of an aircraft carrier. Comparing the modified Kaga with its original state, you can see that its flight deck has changed from a trapezoidal shape to a rectangular one. According to him, by changing the shape of the ship's bow from trapezoidal to rectangular, it reduces airflow interference from the bow direction, improving stability during takeoff. This was designed to optimize the use of the F-35B.
Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force carrier Kaga.
Captain Ichiro proudly stated that the DDH-184 is no longer just a helicopter destroyer. It should now be called the aircraft carrier Kaga. But isn't Japan's constitution supposed to prohibit the self-defense forces from owning aircraft carriers? To be precise, according to Japan's constitution, the government's stance is that it cannot possess offensive aircraft carriers capable of destroying enemy territories. However, defensive aircraft carriers are not prohibited. The care for, after its modifications, is exclusively for the maritime self-defense forces' needs. Japan's Ministry of Defense has no plans to permanently station F-35B units on the Kaga. The Senkaku Islands, called the Diaoyu Islands by China, are Japanese territory. However, just like Taiwan, China propagates that these islands are an inseparable part of its territory. This chain of islands has always been coveted by China. China deployed civilian fishing vessels carrying several suspicious individuals who, while waving the 5-star red flag, quickly landed on the islands. They completely ignored the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force JASDF ships rapidly approaching and issuing warning broadcasts. The footage shows Chinese fishermen shouting loudly after landing, "We are standing on Chinese soil." Another individual holding a radio shouts, "PLA, come and reinforce us." Meanwhile, the PLA Zohun 52D fleet is shown sailing in the East China Sea, its speed visibly increasing. Excited scenes of the Chinese fishermen were broadcast via satellite across the mainland. They fervently declared, "This has always been China's, and now it's time for us to take it back with our own hands. The national leadership must not hesitate any longer." At the JSDF's Mogami-class ship broadcasted a warning, "You have illegally invaded Japanese territory. Withdraw immediately, or we will take coercive measures." Simultaneously, several Japanese F-15 fighter jets began circling over the Senkaku Islands. Officials from Japan's Ministry of Defense began analyzing China's strategy. If it were a standalone conflict with Japan or an invasion of Taiwan, the PLA would undoubtedly win in the short term. However, a prolonged conflict would significantly impact China's economy. Although China is a continental nation, most of its trade is conducted via maritime routes. Whether blockading Taiwan or Japan, a prolonged confrontation would devastate its imports and exports. Even more concerning would be if U.S. President Trump decided to intervene, as the balance of power would then shift dramatically. China's actions clearly signal preparations for an invasion. Launching a full-scale attack on a large island like Taiwan is extremely risky, while the Senkaku Islands are comparatively easier targets. To invade Taiwan, China must first prepare for U.S. military intervention rather than Taiwan's resistance. Securing the first island chain before occupying Taiwan is essential. While China's actions may seem chaotic, Japan's Ministry of Defense anticipates the scale of conflict to be far larger than it appears. Japan must also prepare itself. The balance of armed peace has long since collapsed. China's annual military expenditure exceeds $1.6 trillion, easily 3 times that of Japan. In other words, it could deploy 3 or more equivalent self-defense forces simultaneously. Furthermore, due to the review of the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty, U.S. forces have gradually withdrawn from Japan. A clear example is the 1992 withdrawal of U.S. forces from the Philippines, after which China quickly advanced into the South China Sea, occupying multiple islands and transforming them into military bases. By the time the weakened Philippine military attempted to respond, it was already too late.
Control measures against the Philippine ships, immediately stop infringement.
We must move the Kaga aircraft carrier closer to the Senkaku Islands to provide security. However, Japan's intelligence gathering capabilities are limited. Even though Captain Ichiro can make this assessment now, it is still too early to act decisively. Once again, American satellites provided imagery showing a Chinese naval fleet centered around 2 aircraft carriers traveling toward the Senkaku Islands. Footage shows a military center where PLA missile vehicles are neatly aligned, with large armories displaying rows of weapons. Ammunition, fuel equipment, and medical supplies are all being transported to airports and shelters. Regardless of the situation, China's series of actions are abnormal and likely represent highly advanced combat strategies. Japan must assume that the Chinese military is highly likely to immediately engage in combat operations, similar to the situation at Scarborough Shoal in the Philippines. Ships passing through the Taiwan Strait and aircraft flying nearby will face restrictions. If the situation escalates, we will have to protect the Japanese expatriates living in Taiwan. U.S. forces stationed in Japan will inevitably be involved in Taiwan's defense, becoming entangled in this military conflict. In response to the escalation military tensions in the southwestern region caused by China's large-scale military maneuvers and its infringement of the Senkaku Islands and their airspace, Japan's Ministry of Defense has decided to launch the military operation plan, HENSI, to reclaim the territory by force. The Ministry of Defense announced the deployment of multiple maritime self-defense force vessels, including the helicopter carrier Kaga, in the southwestern region. At the same time, parts of the Air Self-Defense Force and Ground Self-Defense Force's air defense will be relocated and transported by Maritime Self-Defense Force transport ships to conduct amphibious landing operations. Why is the Kaga so significant to the Japanese? We asked Captain Kaikrode. On January 31, 1932, the Kaga became the first aircraft carrier to sail to the mouth of the Yangtze River in China. and deployed 17 aircraft over Shanghai's Hongqiao Airport to showcase Japan's military power. In the following month, the Kaga's air wing launched aerial strikes against Chinese forces on the Shanghai battlefield. At the time, its Type 3 fighters not only bombed Shanghai, but also engaged in the world's first naval carrier-based aerial combat. 6 Type 3 fighters and 4 Type 13 attack aircraft engaged 4 Chinese Air Force Otowu reconnaissance planes. The Imperial Japanese Navy's Kaga, paired with the Type 13 carrier attack aircraft, scored the first naval aerial combat victory against Chinese opponents. After the ceasefire agreement took effect on March 3, 1932, the Kaga withdrew from the mission, transferring the battlefield to the armored cruiser Azuma. From a foreigner's perspective, this sense of historical pride is understandable. The U.S. Navy also names many of its warships after notable battles. The Japanese believe, or even hold a superstitious view, that the Kaga's extensive combat reputation accumulated from 1932 to 1938 in the China battlefield can still exert its legendary prowess against modern China. This might explain why the Kaga, part of the Izumo class, completed its aircraft carrier conversion ahead of the Izumo herself. On the other hand, during the Pearl Harbor attack, the Kaga was one of 6 participating aircraft carriers equipped with Japan's latest shallow water torpedoes at the time. It departed from Sasebo port at the latest. During the Battle of Midway in June 1942, after launching an attack on the Midway base and while rearming carrier-based aircraft at 7:22 a.m. Japan time, the Kaga was struck by a surprise dive bombing raid by U.S. Navy SPD Dauntless bombers. The Kaga was hit by 1,000-pound bombs. The enormous explosion directly destroyed the bridge, killing the captain and key officers on the spot. The bombs and ignited fuel caused uncontrollable fires on board. By 4:26 p.m., the fire reached the gasoline storage tanks, triggering a massive explosion. The hull broke in two and soon sank into the sea. Today, the Ka has become the sea-based launch and landing base for Japan's latest stealth fighter, the F-35B. The Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force commander has already sent a message to the PLM. This is no joke. We have full authority to take military action. In the waters of the Senkaku Islands, the broadcaster is shouting at the top of his lungs. However, plans cannot keep up with changes. On the Diaoyu Islands, the Chinese Zohai 54A class frigate and Japan's flagship, the Maya, began exchanging artillery fire. Both sides are firing The Zohai 54A class frigate is the mainstay ship of the Chinese Navy, known for its comprehensive capabilities and large numbers. It is also equipped with long-range anti-ship missiles. It is now retaliating with its new 4.5 naval gun against the bow of the 54A frigate. The reason the situation has not escalated into a missile exchange is that the Maya class electronic warfare system is extremely advanced, giving it an advantage in electronic jamming, effectively suppressing the 54A's fire control communication. However, China's stronger Zhou 52D class destroyer is already en route to the Senkaku Islands. Its fire saturation attack. Even if some missiles are intercepted, the remaining missiles could still deliver a fatal strike to the Maya class. Now, the Kaga must make a decision. China's naval combat capabilities are continuously improving. 2 F-35B fighters take off, planning to fly at low altitude and break the sound barrier near the Zhou 52D to scrape off its radar antennas. Once they succeed, the result will be shocking. The Chinese Navy will be suppressed by Japan's electronic warfare capabilities and will be unable to detect the stealth F-35Bs. Although the planes must get very close to the target, which is extremely dangerous in combat, but Japan has great confidence in the skills of their pilots. Thank you for watching this episode. This work is inspired by the Japanese manga artist Kawaguchi Kaiji's aircraft carrier Ibuki. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. Stay tuned for the next episode. Happy Chinese New Year!